afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul, and I am a nerd, and you are here for our August 2015 Tabs 3 virtual user group meeting that we are affectionately calling Throwback Thursday, or TBT. If you're familiar with this, it's kind of, I guess, a Facebook concept where you put pictures or something on your Facebook page that takes people back to where you were 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Well, we're going back 5 years today because Patty is sick today, so she can't fill in for Leanne, who's taken a personal day. I would normally call Leanne our humble moderator. I'm going to be your not-so-humble moderator. And so we are going back to the way things were 5 years ago when we started recording these virtual user group meetings, and it's just me and Mary Jo in a room, and we are going to moderate for each other. So hold on tight. It's going to be exciting. Today we are talking about write-ups and write-downs versus write-off. Mary Jo's going to cover that topic. There's a lot of confusion about what the difference is between a write-up and a write-off, or a write-down and a write-off. Mary Jo will clear that up, and I'm going to talk about how to combine vendors and move invoices from one vendor to another for a variety of different reasons. We're also going to talk about the pre-release of version 18, so I'm going to mention that right now just to get you kind of thinking about it. I will give more exact details in how you can participate in the pre-release of version 18 if you are so inclined to do so when we get to the end of today's virtual user group meeting. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. This right here is our go-to webinar control panel. So if you're still looking at something on your screen that looks a little like this, then you have not pressed this button that looks like an arrow pointing to the right, because had you pressed that button, this thing would have gone off the right side of your screen and disappeared. And that's what you want to do. You want to press this button and get rid of this so that you can see everything. But you've probably got my screen behind this if you're still looking at it, and this will get rid of it. When you do that, this button will then turn into an arrow that points to the left, because that's how you bring it back. And why would you want to bring it back? Why? Because you have a question and you're shy. You type your questions here, you remember to hit send, and as I said, it would normally be Leanne, our humble moderator, but it's either me, our in-humble moderator, or Mary Jo, our yet still humble moderator. Whoever's not talking will recognize that you have a question, will interrupt the other one at the exact opportune time, and will ask your question on your behalf. So just type those questions, hit the send button. You'll get your question asked on your behalf. Now, if you are getting your question answered and we are headed down the wrong track, or you want to ask a follow-up question, or you want to interject something, just keep typing here and just keep remembering to hit send. And whoever is humbly or in-humbly moderating at the time will interrupt the other person and make sure that we stay on track and make sure your follow-up questions are answered. If instead you are not feeling shy and you have a question, you can press this button that looks like a hand with an arrow in front of it that's pointing upwards. That means raise your hand. Same thing will happen. One of us will recognize you have a question, only instead of asking your question on your behalf, we will unmute your microphone and let you ask your own question. That microphone will remain unmuted until the question has been answered, so do not hesitate to interrupt or interject or keep us on track or ask a follow-up question. And so now, without any further ado, I'm going to press the actual magic buttons, which maybe someday we'll tell you where those are on your keyboard. But for now, I'm the only one who can do it. We press the magic buttons, we go over here to tabs, and we let Mary Jo talk about writing off and writing up and writing down. Mary Jo?
Okay, as Paul said, this can kind of cause a lot of confusion. When do we write up and write down, and when do we write off, and when is it allowed? I'm going to go into Client Manager because I like to see everything over here. It's easy for me to manage my clients here. So let me get into Client 100. And on this matter, I have some WIP. I don't have any AR balance. I just have some WIP. So let's talk about write up and write down. Write up and write down can only be done on work in process time, WIP. It has not been included on a statement. It's not been billed. It is still in WIP. We're writing up and down either hours or amounts or something like that to equal something else, whether it's fee costs or it's WIP, fees or costs or whatever. It's always in WIP. We'd always be able to see it here in these columns on Client Manager. If I was writing off, Write-offs are always done on an AR balance. It's something that you've already billed and you're going to write it off. Either the client is never going to pay you, or you had an agreement and you're going to take off a certain amount and you've already billed it, so you need to write it off. So write up and write down, always on cost or fee WIP. Write-off is always going to be on an AR balance. So this client here, let's say that we decide that we want to write this time up. Maybe it's a flat fee client that it's actually supposed to be higher, or it's a contingent case and we got more money in or less money in on the settlement, and we haven't billed it yet, so we want to write that time up to whatever the settlement was. It's probably going to be the most often time that you're going to write up or write down. Or maybe a certain timekeeper needs to write up or write down their time. We can control all of that with write up, write down, as long as we're in the fee part, or the WIP part. So I've added a button here on my client manager for write up and write down. Doesn't look like I have my button for write off, which I'm going to go ahead and add that so I can show you how to do that. Usually this one is blank if you haven't used Client Manager, but I'm going to choose one. Whichever spot I choose, I can add a button, and I'm going to choose the write off. And then if you didn't have write up, write down, you could choose that into a different spot. And now I've got a write off there. So I'm going to go right ahead and make sure I've got both of those buttons and then click my run button again so I can do either of those tasks. So in this case, let's say I want to write up this time to $1,000. I got a $1,000 settlement for this, and I want to make sure my time equals that. Now, write up and write down is going to equally, if I tell it to just write up all time, it will proportionately write it up or write it down by whatever the time the timekeeper worked. So let's go into write up, write down, and I'll show you what I mean. So you can make your backup beforehand. I'm not going to for our backup, our training purposes, but you can back up make your backup beforehand. But transaction type, I'm going to say I want to write up the fees. I want to write up my fee time to equal $1,000. So right now I can do either certain transaction codes, I can do certain timekeepers, certain categories, or I can do a cutoff date, all time, dated this to this I want to write up. Everything else I want to leave it alone. Or I want just this timekeeper's time, just timekeeper number 2 to number 2. I want only their time to be written up or write down. So you've got some choices there. And you also have this button to include entries that are on hold. So any entries that you've ever marked on hold for fees, you can actually include those as well in your totals. Now, we get to this point and people get confused because they're like, well, it's all grayed out. I can't even get in here and figure out anything. I can't check anything that how do I get this? Well, you always have to click on this calculate client total. First you click on that, and then all of these things become available. They all light up for you. So then we can decide, do we want to do a percentage or an amount? We could choose to write everything up 25% or write it down 25%, or we can just say a specific amount. In the example I was talking about, we're going to write it up to $1,000. So it tells me what my current fee total will be. This is my WIP total. And what do I want the new total to be? Well, in my case, we said $1,000. If that's all I wanted to do, I could then just say OK, and it will go, like I said, proportionately. And depending on what timekeepers worked on this and consisted of this $625, it will write up that time so that it will all equal $1,000. If I wanted to do it by hours, maybe I want to have the hours go up to 5 hours instead of 2.4. I can actually write up the hours as well. Otherwise, it will leave the hours alone. When I write up and write it down, it's still going to keep those worked hours for our employees the same because we don't want to up that amount because you may be paying them some kind of productivity bonus on that time. We don't want to change those hours that they worked. It's only going to change the amounts here. So if I write up my time here to $1,000, I still have all those worked hours intact, but I've just made everything proportionate so that all the timekeepers will then have an amount that they brought in that would equal that $1,000. If I do hours, I will be adjusting hours, and so I have to be careful with that. I do believe that it will keep the worked hours, but we are changing the billed hours. So this is, you might be paying your productivity bonus on worked hours, but you may be paying it on billed hours. It will keep the worked intact, but it's going to change those billable hours. So if you pay on billable hours, that's going to change, and you're going to have to be careful with that. And it might be what you need to do, or it might not. So just be aware of that. So now in my example, I was keeping it very simple. I'm just going to write it up to $1,000 and say OK. It's going to ask me if I'm sure. I'm going to go ahead and say yes, and it's complete. If I go back out and look at my client manager, I will see when I refresh that it's now going to equal $1,000. If I actually look at that time, I can see that here's timekeeper 1, and it has all their time written up, and see timekeeper 2 is in there as well. It's also writing up timekeeper 2's, but it's keeping all of my hours intact. So everything here is now proportionate, and it will equal $1,000 when I bill. I can do the same thing with cost. You saw when I was in there. There also is a cost part, and I can break that out. I can do expenses only, so if I'm just going to do the copies, postage, fax, things like that, I can write up or write down those, and I can write these down to 0 too. So if I decide that I want to keep those entries in there, but I want it to equal 0, I'm not going to bill those expenses for copies, I can just choose expenses, calculate my total, and I had $100.20, I can just write that down to 0. And it will still show on the bill, but it will be a 0. And everybody will proportionately, again, those will all be proportionally written down. I can do advances only. If I had court costs or I had different advance amounts that I wanted to write down, I can do that as well. Calculate my total. I have $500 in advances. I can write that down. Or maybe I want to do both, expenses and advances. I can have that option as well. It combines that total, and regardless of whether it was an expense or advance, my total is now only going to be $500 or whatever it is. So you have a lot of control over what you're writing up and what you're writing down and how you're doing it. And again, this is all on WIP time. You've never even billed it. This all happens before you ever send the client a bill.
Mary Jo?
Yes.
I have a question. Well, I don't have a question. Victor does.
Okay.
Can I write down a timekeeper by more than their charged fees? I think he wants to write down time that goes beyond what's in WIP.
To create a negative, like a credit?
That's what I'm assuming.
No, I don't believe you can't put a credit in there with the write-up, write-down. If I come in here and I wanted to do fees and calculate the total and try to put in here that I want it to equal negative $100, it won't even do it. It's thinking I want a calculator here. It doesn't even allow a negative amount. I can go to 0, but I can't go beyond that. Usually at that point, you're going to talk about a combination, because I'm guessing that you have an amount you've already billed the client, plus you've got some WIP time, and you need to have that total equal something else. And if that's the case, we'll write down all the current time to 0, and then we'd have to go in and write off some of the build time in the AR. So you might have a combination, but we can't put in here anything less than what they already owe. The lowest we can go is 0. Okay. Is that it, Paul?
Hold on.
Okay. Is there a follow-up?
It's on hold entries, the final billing the invoices. Then, I don't know if I'm reading this whole question. It's Rachel. Hi, Rachel. It says, hi, we have clients we are not allowed to bill photocopies for. What we had been doing was putting them on hold, final billing the invoices, then unholding and billing them and writing them off. Would the write-down be a better solution? Well, I would think so.
Yes, definitely. You can, instead of putting them on hold, just come in to the expenses only, and you can even do beginning T code. So let's say that you had expenses on that bill of postage that you do want to bill, but you only want to write down the copies. You can come in here and choose all the copy. I think there's a photocopy in here, and I could... photocopies, there we go. I can just write down just the photocopies even. So I can even get more specific, calculate my total, and write that down to 0. It would just then have the photocopies as 0 entries on the bill, and then be done. So, or you can do it how you're doing it, put them on hold, come in here and then write them down to 0, and then just, they're done. You can do a dummy bill for it if you don't want the client to see it at all. So there's a couple of different things there that you could do.
And I'd interject that if she doesn't want the client to see it at all, she could still write them down, but make them billable, don't print.
Mm-hmm.
And that would effectively final bill them at 0. They wouldn't affect the total, but they'd be updated at the time.
Yep, lots of combinations there. So moving on to, and write-up would work the same way. I wrote down.
Rachel's getting a little greedy here, though, Mary Jo. She said, perfect. I don't suppose I can do it for a range of clients. And I know the answer to that, Rachel. It's no, you can't write down for a range of clients.
No, just it's a one by one. Yep. Okay, so I wrote up to $1,000. You can write down the same way. So just instead of writing it and telling my new total would be higher, I would just write it down to as low as I want up to 0. So I can do that. So let's move on to writing off. So I'm going to put in a different client here, and we're going to go into 200.02. So this client is an example that they owe $204.75. They've made a payment of $19.51, and they've got a little whip time out there. Let's say that this payment for $19.51, they paid that, and we've decided that, you know what, we're going to take that as our payment. We're not going to bill this remaining $204.75. We will bill whatever our whip is coming up, but this was a little bit more than what we had agreed on or whatever it was. We decided we want to write off that whole $204.75. So what we would do in this instance is we're going to do a write-off. So I'm going to click on the write-off. Again, I'm saying no because I'm in sample data, but you can say yes to that. And I can tell it how much I want that to be written off. So I can write off the entire balance, give it a date, or I can tell it which statement that I want to write off. Now this amount has a little bit more due, so I'm guessing I probably have something in here that's, I don't know, that's more than what it is, and I'm in sample data, so I have no idea what that's doing, but it may still not have that payment included on a bill, so it's not registering it. But in mine, I would write off the entire balance, or I would come in and just tell it exactly how much I wanted to write off, 204 or whatever it was, 75, and I can write that amount off. I also can get very specific. I can tell it which statement I want to write off. I can pick a statement, and I can say, well, I'm going to write off this 7175, and I can write that off, and again, tell it the amount of that statement I want to write off, all of it or part of it. I can do timekeepers. If I just want to write off timekeeper number 2's time, I can be specific. And let me get out of this. Stuck in here. Let me get out of that. I have too much money in there. See, it won't even let me write off more than's due. I had 75 cents instead of 25 cents. So if I go to a specific timekeeper, I can choose the different timekeepers and just write off their time or a portion of their time. So again, you can be very specific on what you write down, either the entire balance, a statement, or part of it. Now, sometimes, and the reason that I'm getting I can't even do, if I tried to write off the entire balance, if I was on all timekeepers and all statements, I will get a message and it will tell me that I can't write off that entire balance because the client has unbilled WIP. This is another thing that confuses people. They get this message and they go, oh, I can't write it off. Now what do I do? You can, but you can't write off an entire balance. You have to just uncheck that and then be specific about the amount that you want to write off. So if I go in and say that and say, okay, now it will allow me to do it, it just won't let me do the entire balance if I have WIP balance, but I can't have that box checked or it won't let me write that off. So it's stopping you for a minute because it's saying, well, wait, you can't write off entire balance because you got WIP, but uncheck the box and you can still write off what you need to. Then it's going to tell you all adjustments will be made immediately. Do I want to continue? Yes. Then we're going to get into this screen where we can put a transaction code, and I recommend if you don't have one made to make a transaction code that is just for write-offs. Put it in there so that then you can just have that default to this. It's going to be, in our case, we've got it as 16. It's even got write-off per whoever it is. So if this is the attorney, per their initials, whatever it would be. And you can choose whether you want that to be billable, printable, show the client this information or not. When you say okay, of course, I've got something in there that doesn't recognize in my spell check, but now my write-off is complete. If I go back over here and I look, I have a zero balance now. So I've effectively taken that amount off, and now I still have my WIP to bill, and I'm all set. Now, one other thing that you may do is you may just want to write off the finance charge. If you're charging finance charge, you may want to go in and just write that portion off. That's all you want to do. You don't want to write off the balance, just the finance charge. So in this case, I'm going to go into our mega construction. Again, just hit write off. I'm going to go in and uncheck the entire balance, and now I've got the line here for the finance charge, and I can just write off just the finance charge portion. I can change the date, or I can leave the date the same, whatever you want to do for that date, and I can just write that part off. I don't have to write any part of the actual fee balance off, but I'm just going to waive the finance charge. Say okay, Again, it's going to be effective immediately. I can put in some description, say OK, and it's complete. When I go in, it's going to lower their balance by that finance charge, whatever that is. So that, in effect, is your write-off and your write-up, write-down. And Paul?
Well, Rachel has a follow-up question. She wants to know, is there any way to print a list of write-offs based on the transaction code we use?
There is, in a transaction file list, no, it will show a zero amount. But there are several reports that will include write-offs and give you the totals. If you go into, we use this report finder all the time, and there's a couple different ones here that you can check and see if it's going to give you what you want. But I go into help, into the documentation. We go to our tabs 3, and then our report finder. And if you go into that and you check write-offs, or write-up and write-downs if you want to track those as well, but you can go in and see all the reports that will include write-offs. And then you can go into one of those and see which ones will allow you to do transaction codes or whatever. So there are several here that they may or may not show you the transaction code, but they'll at least show you the write-offs themselves.
And Victor had a follow-up question to write up, write down, and he didn't really phrase it as a question, so I'm going to tell you what he's posed, and you tell us what you think of this, Mary Jo.
Okay.
Originating attorneys at our firm eat any write-downs, but don't necessarily do any work. So attorney 1 is the originator, attorney 2 is the one doing the work on a fixed fee contract. If attorney 2 goes over the fixed rate, he still gets credit for work, but attorney 1 takes the write-down. So I think what he's saying is he wants to write down. I think what he's doing is explaining why he wanted to go negative in his question before. Remember, he asked, can I go negative? I think that's because he wants somebody else to take the penalty for a write-down. The originator should take the penalty for the write-down, even though he's not the one who did the work. So the answer is still no. We thought maybe it was a combination of write-off and write-down, but there's nothing.
I gotcha. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, he's right. You can't go down any further than the zero, so you can't.
I think what you do is
you put time in for that person.
Well, or you could put a negative. He says he uses adjustment transactions right now, which is kind of what I'm saying. Put in a negative 4 hours for the originator that is counted in the final bill, but doesn't print.
Right.
And so then that would reduce the amount, even though the original guy that did the work is getting credit for having gone over.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense? And I think that's exactly what Victor's saying he does when he says,
and that would be the workaround. I don't think that you could handle that with a write-up, write-down. You're right. Paul, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking that, when Leanne is gone and when Patty is gone, everybody has a lot of questions.
Yeah, I was beginning to. I think they're trying to test us to see if we can handle doing this on our own.
It's this Throwback Thursday. You set us up. Anyway, we're glad to answer questions. And in fact, I'm kind of excited because, when nobody has questions, we wonder if anybody's ever really listening to us. So, all right, Paul, go ahead.
Well, maybe Patty didn't send the email. When people learned. At one point, we went to something called GoToWebinar, which has unlimited seating virtually. And so people didn't start arriving 15 minutes early like they used to. And so it would be like 5 minutes before, and there'd be no people in the meeting yet, in the virtual user group meeting yet. And I'd say, well, Patty's new. Maybe she forgot to send the email. Okay. I am going to talk about moving invoices and combining vendors. Now, why would you want to move invoices? Well, there's two potential scenarios. One, of course, is that you want to combine vendors. Maybe you created a UPS that was number 100 and another UPS that was number 200 by mistake. And so now you want to move all the invoices off the 100 UPS onto the 200 UPS, and then you can get rid of the 100 UPS vendor, and you've got them combined. So it's kind of like combining vendors when you're moving invoices. That's one reason to do it. The other is it just got put on the wrong vendor, but maybe you meant to put USPS, but instead you put UPS. So let's go look at this. If we go up to maintenance and then invoice and then transfer invoices. This is where you find it. Maintenance, then invoice, then transfer invoices. And we're not going to do a backup, but you always should. Now, this is the transfer invoices screen, and you can do a lot of things here. I could simply say, I just want to move 100 to 200. Or you could say, I only want to do a specific one. And so you could choose a reference number. This would be the example of where it should have gone to USPS. You're going to move from UPS to USPS. You're going to pick one invoice that should have gone to USPS that mistakenly got put on UPS. Or you can choose a range of dates or a beginning and ending range of reference numbers. And you have the ability to transfer postage checks as well. And so really, if we're going to move everything from UPS to United Parcel Service, and we're going to do paid and unpaid, and we're going to transfer postage checks, that's what we do. And we say, okay. And there they are. It didn't transfer anything. Did I do something wrong, Mary Jo, or did I run it by mistake when we were playing with it before? Okay. No, let's just try this. No, I think I did it before when we were playing around with it by mistake. So that's what happens. You simply say, I'm going from this vendor to this vendor. And if you're just moving one invoice, usually... Oh, probably because There we go. I have a feeling because I went in there, it assumed I wanted to do that. Okay. Gosh, I wonder. Yeah, that's why. Okay. There we go. Now it's 1-to-1. I guess I shouldn't have clicked on that beginning and ending reference number to show you that. There we go. We transferred them. Okay. So bottom line, let's come back in here because I want to show you how it is when you come in. And I'm a little curious myself. Nope, we're not going to back up, but you should. I had blank, and I went to show you this, and I got it to 0 to 0. So basically, you put in 100 to 200. Oops. Yeah. Okay, very good. So that's it. 100 to 200. It puts in the 0 to 0. If you're going to transfer them all, you need to make it 1 to whatever. I think this is a protection. There are a couple other places where we get these protections. We call them attorney protection. Somebody wanders in here not knowing what they're doing, like me, I guess. And this, you need to specify what your beginning and ending reference number is, or else it's not going to transfer them. So that's that. That's how you transfer them. And then basically all you have to do then is go into the old vendor. If you meant to combine vendors, you go into the old vendor and delete them. And they're gone. And you have effectively transferred stuff from one to another. Now, one thing, Mary Jo, do these transfer? These totals are maintained individually. It did not. So I'm thinking that if you're going to actually take a vendor and combine it, you're going to need to take these totals, paid, month-to-date, year-to-date, and to-date, and drop them into the new vendor, or else you're going to lose that information. Now, for some people, that doesn't matter. They're not tracking that. But if you are, I think it's important to remember. I might point out that, and I don't know if this is, it is 0 now, so it may actually have adjusted those totals. I think you're probably right. Now, this sort of thing, these buckets, these are going away in version 18. So it's a good segue to my introducing how to, I think so, how to, Mary Jo's looking at me like in AP, and I'm like, oh, of course they are. How to get on the pre-release list for being able to be one of the first people to get version 18. One of the things that's changing in version 18 is we're getting rid of all the buckets. There's no more month-end close, no more when you get to the end of your billing period, you don't have to go from a month to the next in billing. All the reports are date-based. There are no more bucket-based or or period-based reports. There's already no more advancing the month in general ledger. And so now there won't be anything like that in tabs, and I think in AP.
I don't know about AP, but in tabs, can I get an amen for all the people that are out there doing timekeeper productivity and you get to January and you can't get last year, because that's going away.
That's going away.
You will be able to get all the years prior, which, yay.
Now, there are a lot of other things that are changing in version 18, and I'm not really supposed to talk too much about them, but I'll tell you that there is now integration with your online banking. Reconciliation is the same in trust and AP. It used to be different. Don't ask why. Don't get Mary Jo started on that. A lot of neat things happening. So if you want to be one of the first people on your block to get this, you can sign up for what they're calling the pre-release, which basically means that you're helping them make sure that everything is working right before they release it to the general public. If you are interested in doing this, I'm going to go out here to a web browser, and all you need to do is go to www.tabs3.com/pre-release. And that will take you to, okay, maybe it's just pre-release. There we go. No dash in the release. And that will take you to this whatever form. But it's tabs3.com/pre-release with, as we just discovered, no dash. That'll take you to this form. It'll talk a little bit about what's changed, the date-based reports, the automatic trust payments, just like client funds, automatic trust payments on your bill without your having to go make the transaction yourself, import bank transactions when you're doing a reconciliation, really streamlined fee and cost entry, especially in the practice management side. And all you need to do is put your name, firm name, a couple small details in here, and you will be considered for pre-release. That really just means that they're going to look at it, and unless they find something that would disqualify you from pre-release, I will tell you that because of the way the credit card rules are changing, if you're using the credit card processing, that kind of negates your ability to do a pre-release because they have not finished that part of the Tabs 3 version 18 update. So consider that. It's something that's very much worth considering, being in the pre-release. We've had a lot of people do it in the past. It's never created a problem for anyone, and you get your hands on the neat new features earlier, and you get to help STI make their software even better. And you get to have a hand in shaping things and having your opinion count even more than it counts now. Now, next month, and I'm kind of stalling while I run back to my desk because I'm out here trying to monitor questions. Here we go. Next month, we are going to be talking about aged work in process. I'm going to take that topic. It's something that sometimes people don't even think about, but you have aged work in process. It's an asset. If you haven't built it, how old it is important to you. And Mary Jo's going to talk about the client ledger report. We're going to go back to our series of virtual user group meetings that cover all the different reports, and we're going to hit two of them next month, Aged WIP and Client Ledger. And one last thing I want to talk to you about is if you go to our website, which is www.attorneycomputersystems.com with an emphasis on the S at the end of systems, you will find all these videos of all these user group meetings, including the one you're attending right now. So if you click on videos, you'll see information on our water cooler virtual user group meetings, which is a combination of the three. It's just what we call them, the water cooler. You'll find the Tabs 3, the Practice Master, and the World Docs virtual user group meetings. If you click on one of these, you will find a registration information for the next month. Patty is not feeling very good today, so she tried to change this. Usually this gets changed right when we're giving our meeting. She will get this changed tomorrow morning. And information on and videos, recorded videos of all the prior virtual user group meetings that we had. So great resource. You can always go back if you miss one or if you want to rewatch something. And you know, I think she said that, but let's go check. You can come here to find that out. We also have a couple other videos. We have our Coffee Pot webinars. That's another live event that I do every month on a Friday. We have our eBytes video series that Mary Jo records 3 of these each month, one on Practice Master, one on Tabs, and one on World Docs. And then we have the long format Paul and Mary Jo show where we take a topic that may be a little more broad and go into great detail. So be sure to take advantage of all the videos that are out there. They go way back, as we said today on Throwback Monday, TPM, I suppose you'd call it, that we've been doing this and recording them for about 4 or 5 years. We didn't actually check the date, but it's been quite a while. So there's a lot of recorded video content with a lot of tips and a lot of information. Be sure to take advantage of it. So everybody have a good rest of the day, good rest of the week, month, and we will see you in September